But the real goal is to change the diet, to change the microbiome, to positively influence our health. So that's really what this journey tonight's going to be about. So when I mean probiotics, we might think already of a supplement, but really it's just changing our natural bacteria that we were basically essentially born with, or that we received the day we were born. Go from there. So I always give this with my medical disclaimer. Not a physician, so don't go home tonight and swallow the whole bottle of probiotic. That's not what I'm recommending. So just some objectives. So hopefully I hit all of these tonight. We want to meet our microbiome and shake its hand and know who that system is down there in our GI tract. Again, get just a basic understanding of dietary principles to help this 100 trillion microbe community that lives, basically from our mouth to our colon. Again, we could spend a lot more time than just what we have tonight on going through this, but we're just touch the surface tonight on this. And again, I would refer you back to Mary's book as far as different recipes and so forth. Half of that book is just on recipes for helping support the biome in our GI tract. We're going to learn how to best protect and support microbiome diversity. So the more we get into understanding probiotics and different strains of probiotic, we really want more than just Lactobacillus acidophilus, or what I used to sell 20 years ago, which is still a great product, but just selling Florigen or just one strain of bacteria is probably not the best thing for us long term. I think we can all agree upon that. So we really want to figure out how to get this diversity back if we've lost it, or how do we just continue to keep it going if we don't have any GI issues right now. And then reviewing evidence-based strategies to help, again, correct some type of dysbiosis. If we run into that trap, I see this all the time at the pharmacy here, where patients are on multiple courses of antibiotics, and then they got chronic diarrhea. Years ago, when I worked regular retail pharmacy, I saw firsthand patients getting C. diff, which is a very opportunistic, it's a very hard infection to get rid of out of the GI tract. We pretty much are just, once you kind of have it, you can treat it and get rid of it to a point, but sometimes it tends to come back and rear its ugly head. So we got to be careful with some of those things. So that is that. All right, so just a brief overview here. How do we digest, absorb, assimilate our food is extremely dependent upon the bacterial numbers and the variety in our digestive tract. So again, thinking from my mouth all the way to my colon, my large intestine, how does that all take place? The more we research, it uncovers and understands the connection between our gut and our health, and the more we understand how the microbiome influences everything from neurological, cardiovascular, and immune system function. So the more we keep learning about the bacteria and all these trillions of microbes, boy, this is connected to, again, gut-brain connection, gut-immune connection, gut-cardiovascular connection, and so on and so forth. So again, we're just every year continue learning more and more about how beneficial these little bacteria are in our GI tract. And it's even just more than bacteria. We'll get to that in a minute. Gut health can affect our risk of cancer, so that's maybe something we don't normally think of every day. Is that, wow, if I am killing off my good bacteria, is that predisposing me to different cancers and so forth? Again, there's a lot of more research that needs to be done to tease out some of those things, but there is some connection there, of course. Gut health and how it can affect blood sugar. So again, that may be something we don't normally think about. Maybe we go on, let's just take a type 2 diabetic patient, they get an infection, they go on an antibiotic, and then all of a sudden, the next day, the next week, the next month, they're noticing that they can't control their blood sugars as well. And would we connect those two things together, taking an antibiotic and then having a type 2 diabetic now have uncontrolled blood sugars? I wouldn't necessarily think of that right away, but these are some of the things that we're starting to uncover. And then gut health can affect how well we sleep. Again, let's just not take an antibiotic this time, we're just eating the poor foods. We go on vacation and we skip our diet altogether, and we let's say we did my wife just did a food allergy test. I'll take my wife as an example tonight. I didn't tell her I was going to talk about her tonight, but she just recently had a food allergy test done, and she's eliminated so many things that I'll call them mildly allergic to. Like, she's eaten these foods for her entire life, and now all of a sudden she's avoiding them, and she's doing that for the last 2 weeks. And then every once in a while, like every patient does, and myself included, we cheat on our diet. We're like, what do you mean I can't have egg whites, or just a small amount of creamer in my milk? So she'll do a couple of those things, and all of a sudden, she's even complaining this morning, I feel bloated, I have GI issues, and I'm trying to figure out, as the pharmacist, well, we're both pharmacists, but, she's like, what did I do wrong? What happened? And I'm trying to figure out, well, what did you eat? And then, there's multiple times where she's going to bed, and she wakes up she goes to bed fine, but she wakes up multiple times during the night, GI issues, cramping, and so on and so forth. Again, patients call me all the time. I don't sleep well. I don't ask them how their gut's doing. Do you take melatonin? All the kind of standard things we think about. I always say, are you on magnesium? That's like my go-to product around here. It helps with so many things. But maybe I should start asking the question, oh, you didn't sleep well? Are you on a probiotic? Whoever thinks to ask that. So. And then gut health can affect how well we burn fat, or maybe the better way to say that is, how we manage energy in our body. So again, bacteria are important for that whole process of just macronutrient, assimilation and so forth, and managing all those resources. Bacteria are important for that. So I keep talking about this microbiome, which I already said is bacteria, but it's even more than that. So it's GI resident viruses. So we have actually, let's call it good viruses. Just like we have good and bad bacteria, there are good and bad viruses out there. Some of them reside in our GI tract. Again, we have good and bad fungus out there. So a good example of something that I see all the time is candida, yeast overgrowth. I deal with that all the time. And there's all types of products to help with natural products to help with candida infections. And then also protozoa. Again, sometimes we may not think of these one-celled little microorganisms as anything more than what I learned in freshman biology and never thought of them again. But some of these little guys end up residing in our GI tract. And I'll be honest, we probably don't know if they should be there, if they shouldn't be there. Some of them good, some of them are bad. So that's what we talk about, that whole complex of these organisms making up that 200 trillion, festival that's going on in our small and large intestine. So that's what I kind of mean by the microbiome. And then locations. I touched on this a little bit. Mainly I keep thinking of my colon, my large intestine is where most of these guys are residing, but there's some in the small intestine. There's a few in the stomach. One thing, I deal a lot with acid reflux. If you've ever had that issue, you go to the doctor where they're going to test you for H. pylori to see if that little bugger is sitting in some of your stomach ulcers if you have those. So we have to, again, start thinking about, again, more than just, our midsection, than in our stomachs, essentially. Obviously, microbes live on our skin. I do think I hate to say this during the COVID season, but in general, too much hand sanitizers, and we're trying to sterilize everything and keep everything clean, and that, there's good evidence out there that there's some good benefits, health benefits to having bacteria, especially as a child. We're creating our microbiome and so forth, and having that resilience and understanding what our immune system has to be afraid of and not be afraid of and so forth. So we even have, bacteria on our skin that are beneficial. Which kind of leads me to this next point. Yeah, it's all connected. So this microbiome, these 100 trillion cells, which there's more cells in our microbiome than there are in our entire body, which is crazy to think about. But research. So I'll just read this here. Research demonstrates connections in the following conditions. So IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome. That one's kind of it's kind of intuitive. Autoimmune disorders, though. So again, poor digestive tract, poor microbiome, dysbiosis. The immune system, it depends on what research we look at, 60 to 70% of our immune system is either, I would say, in our GI tract or right on the other side of our GI tract, trying to figure out, again, what's good and what's bad. And that's where the immune system can get misinformation. So I'll use the example of Hashimoto's. We see a lot of Hashimoto's patients here, so which basically, so we're all on the same page. The immune system essentially is producing antibodies that are then attacking the thyroid gland. And so what ends up happening is when a patient eats gluten, that gluten is a protein, but that protein structure is basically similar. That protein structure is similar to that structure of the makeup of that thyroid cell. So that antibody that normally would attack gluten is like, okay, we eat a piece of bread, so now the immune system's going, oh, something's wrong. I need to produce more of these antibodies because this protein now has just been introduced. But the gluten goes away, you digest your food, but now all these antibodies are floating around our bloodstream, and they're like, oh, they come across the thyroid gland, and that protein that's in that thyroid gland is really similar to gluten. So now I'm going to start attacking my thyroid gland. Crap, now what? Now what do I do? So there's that issue. Obesity, I kind of touched on that. These bacteria in our GI tract, if they're doing their job correctly, do a better job of, again, producing energy, burning fat for fuel, so on and so forth. Depression, we can see a connection with serotonin productions being lower when we have poor bacterial health in the gut. And the list goes on. Autism, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, we'll touch on that. Like, how can a poor digestive tract be related to my body's inability to handle carbohydrates? Where's that connection? So we'll touch on that in a few minutes too. You cannot supplement your way out of a poor diet. So I don't want you to use this as a crutch or another Band-Aid, in place of, changing your diet the way that it should be. So let's just kind of walk through that here in just a minute. Because this is 15 doses of 225 billion CFUs, so it's a super high dose. I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to guess the average probiotic dose is probably between, let's just say, 10 and 50 CFUs per dosage form. So this is 225. This is mega dosing. This is $70, $72. Most patients, if they can afford it, great, but they're not going to want to be on that long term, right? So let's figure out a better way through the diet on fixing the biome. Better health starts with your next bite of food. So just start thinking about it that way, that let's be conscious of what we're eating. Let's find out what the things that are going to be helpful for our GI tract and those things that are not helpful. What we can improve, or I don't know if I wrote that right, we can basically improve our microbiome in as little as one day by eating the right foods and avoiding the wrong foods. Good bacteria thrive on fiber. I have, I think, 2 or 3 slides just on fiber alone after this one that we're going to talk quite a bit about fiber. So fiber is fuel for bacteria in the GI tract. That is critical. And again, in our society, I'll call it the SAD diet, the standard American diet. I can't remember exactly what the numbers are, but I think somewhere about the average American gets 15 grams of fiber, something like that, where we need 30 to 45 grams of fiber a day. Fiber's tricky because if you don't leave tonight going, oh, Dan said 45 grams. Don't go out and just do 45 grams of fiber tomorrow. You're going to be horrendously constipated. I almost will guarantee that. So you got to slowly titrate yourself up on good fiber, and we'll talk about that. We want to add more plant-based foods to improve the biome. So again, this isn't all-inclusive, but beans, whole grains. I just got done watching a documentary called Kiss the Ground. Has anyone seen that? On Netflix. Highly recommend watching that. I'll try to sum it up in a few sentences here. It's about an hour-long documentary, but the issue with our soil in the U.S. is, and again, I'm going to overgeneralize a little bit here, but it's full of, we know, pesticides, herbicides. I can't think of the generic. What does that do? It kills the microbiome in the soil. So we don't have soil anymore in the U.S. We have dirt. Dirt doesn't produce healthy food for us, and I think we all know that. So if we go whole grain, that's why we want organic. But my concern is Organic just means that that soil, and I can't remember the numbers, if it's 3 years or 5 years, that they haven't used pesticides or herbicides. It doesn't mean that there's not Roundup still in that soil and then still in that plant that is being labeled as organic. So there's still a lot that we need to do with our food industry. But we have to be careful with whole grains. That again, I would go for organic, of course, but we have to be cautious of what other materials are in that grain that could be possibly detrimental. Because Roundup kills the microbiome of the soil and then of the plant, and then we eat the plant, so it starts to kill our, you can see that trickle-down effect or up effect depending on your perspective.
So weren't you trying to think of glyphosate?
Thank you. Yes, that's it. Yep. Which is everywhere, in my opinion. Yeah. So after this career, I want to become a regenerative farmer after watching that documentary. I keep telling Monica that. She thinks I'm crazy. But anyways, I think that'd be cool. Nuts, seeds, brightly colored fruits and veggies. And then eliminate, or I would say eliminate, but I tried to give patients tonight a little, or those at home watching, a little wiggle room and, at least reduce these foods, so your chemicalized foods. I always say, what does that mean, Dan? Anything on a label that you can't pronounce. Probably shouldn't be put in your body. I always say, if man made it, don't eat it. If you have to open up a wrapper to get into it, probably let's at least have some thought into it. Should we be consuming it? In general, animal foods, processed fats, refined, that should be refined carbs, sugar, flour, chips, so forth. And I'm not perfect. I can tell you I eat all of those. I'm not standing here. I don't want to be preaching all of this and not admitting my own faults here. It's a challenge to do this. I think we all know that. But at least having that awareness, first, and then slowly making changes is important. So diversity is key. Eat the colors of the rainbow, kind of a thing. I gravitate more towards a ketogenic diet. So I do struggle with a little bit of this. So again, I don't want to go into all of that detail, but when I talk about eating fruits and vegetables, in my opinion, I'm eating low glycemic fruits. So your blueberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. Strawberries are a little bit too high on the glycemic index for me personally, and then when you get into the vegetables, we're talking green leafy vegetables. We'll talk about why those are so important in just a minute too, but I'm not going after all the starches per se. So I'm conscious of my carbohydrate load. So when I'm focusing on ketogenic dieting, or let's just call it low carb dieting, fiber is a carbohydrate. So we all have to understand that. And when you look at food labels, it's counted as carbs, but you can, if you're eating more of a low carb diet, you can subtract that fiber off of that carb count, if that makes sense. So you can eat all the, I guess what I'm telling you is you can maintain a ketogenic diet and eat the fiber. It doesn't count towards your carbs. Basically, it doesn't raise your blood sugar, doesn't kick you out of ketosis. Eat dietary foods as fresh as possible. Seasonally, locally, again, things I think intuitively we all know we should be doing that. We shouldn't be getting, what did I see in the grocery store? Raspberries. There was like 2-pint cartons from, I don't even know, Chile or South America, I don't know, somewhere. So we got to be cognizant of those kind of things. What's being sprayed on them. They're being transported thousands of miles, to here and so forth. There's potentially, some issues going on there. Limit or eliminate factory farmed meats that contain antibiotics. So again, we might pay a little bit more at the grocery store for the organic or the farm raised meats, but overall in general, that is better for our health. Again, personally, and I commend my wife for all of this. She does all the cooking and stuff for all of our kiddos at home and myself included, but we started getting all of our meats now at local farms in Jackson, and we live in Germantown, but there's a farm in Jackson that we use now, and then another farm where we get our beef from, and can't remember where they're out of. But anyways, I always encourage everyone to find a good farmer, know how they're raising those animals, and ideally, if you're a meat eater, focus on meats that are grass-fed, all that kind of good stuff, so that they have higher nutrient content, essentially. So going back to carbs here. So understanding carbs for gut health. Carbs are the main energy source for gut bacteria. And then you want to get an array of different fibers. So again, which I call them good carbs, good fiber. So things like pectins, cellulose, hemicellulose, gums, fructans, etc. These different fibers have different benefits then. So not all these bacteria feed on the same fibers, feed on the same energy source. There's different polymer chain lengths, there's branching, there's, we probably all know this, there's soluble fiber that dissolves in water, there's insoluble fiber. Just depends on how long that molecule is, where the branching is, so on and so forth. Fermentability, et cetera, et cetera. These fibers aren't all created equal, so don't eat the same 3 foods every single day like I did a couple of years ago.
Is that
Done.
in this book here?
It is. Yeah, yeah. Mary goes through that extensively. Yeah. No, and don't just eat broccoli, every night for dinner. Or, keep mixing it up. Eat the colors of the rainbow, so to speak. The other thing about carbohydrates, so human enzymatic abilities is limited for hydrolyzing fiber. So again, we can't digest all of these fibers that are in these plants. That's where the bacteria come in. They have all different sets of enzymes that we don't have. Well, we have them, so to speak, right, symbiotically, because they're in us, so that we kind of have them. So different bacteria have different enzymes for metabolism and proliferation. One example of this, I'll kind of digress a little bit here, but we sell a probiotic called Renadil, which is made in Pittsburgh, I think, Pennsylvania, somewhere in Pennsylvania. This little bug in here, this little critter, feeds off of nitrogenic waste. So it's been studied to help reduce nitrogenic waste out of the body and get patients off of dialysis. Not for everybody, but that particular bug has enzymes that eat up nitrogenic waste, and so that patient with 1 kidney or no kidneys or is on dialysis benefits from that greatly, because that particular bacteria likes nitrogen. So how cool is that? So you got to fit, each bug has its own little unique benefit to the body. Switching gears a little bit, so microbiome, these bacteria, they need food, they need the fiber, but you can cheat a little bit. Again, I'm not pushing all these supplements tonight, but I just want you to be aware of them, that what's out there. I didn't grab it, but anyways, let me just go through this slide. So prebiotics, so what do we say a prebiotic is? By definition, it's certain fibers that stimulate commensal or just basically bacterial growth via fermentation. So a prebiotic is just food for the bacteria, plain and simple. Again, I recommend getting it through dietary sources. You can buy the supplement wherever I left it. Maybe it's in my office. But onions, garlic, artichokes, bananas. I would stay away from bananas. Again, if I'm gravitating towards that low-carb ketogenic diet, bananas aren't great for that. In my opinion, too much fructose, too much sugar. But chicory root, nuts, legumes, so on and so forth. Mary goes through more in detail too in her book on that. Here's where the supplements come in. I love IAG. I could spend probably a whole talk just on that fiber alone. This comes from the larch tree. A lot of it's actually grown in Minnesota, but that's been shown and studied to help actually produce or enhance natural killer cells and improve our immune system. Probably because what is it doing? It's improving our gut biome. Fructooligosaccharides, galactooligosaccharides, chicory fiber, fiber plus. There's a whole list of different. That's not all inclusive, of course, but that's some of the ones that we carry for good prebiotics. So again, if somebody's really struggling, they have IBS, horrendous gut issues, so on and so forth, then I'm going to start recommending a prebiotic for that patient. But it's not. Again, let's do it with the diet if we can first. Humans first. Oh, do I mucked that up. Yeah, trivia question. Here we go. So, I put 2 of these in here. Humans first dose of prebiotic typically comes from where? Mother. Yeah, mother's milk. So it's got the. Let me answer here. Yeah, mother's milk. It's the oligo. Whatever I'm trying to say, saccharide, the sugar from mom's milk, essentially. Yep. So we have these commensal organisms in our gut, and they're producing short-chain fatty acids. I think, yeah, put them down. Acetate, propionate, and butyrate. Butyrate is the main source for metabolic energy of basically the cells in our colon, colonocytes. That influences GI epithelial cell integrity and enhances immune function. So having these bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids is going to give us better cell integrity in our GI tract and a better immune system. So wide-ranging health effects, again, metabolic, immune, neurological, colon transit times improved, symptoms of IBS are improved. So we want to make sure that we're feeding these, not just taking a probiotic, but make sure we're feeding them properly through our diet is critical. Otherwise, we're not going to get these short-chain fatty acids to the level that are therapeutic. So that's important to take home. So don't just take a probiotic. It's not going to be enough. Feed it with the fiber. My slides are a little bit out of line here. I apologize. But here's two examples of some prebiotics that we sell. Here's that IAG I talked about, pure encapsulation. Those are two good ones that I like to use. Yep.
That's a pill once a day?
They're both powders, so you got to mix them up. The IAG I absolutely love, just for immune benefit. It tastes sweet. It's super easy to mix up. You know, like you think of like a typical fiber. Years ago I used to do this cleanse with psyllium husk, and I just dreaded it. It just was gross, to put it plainly. Like, why am I doing this? With chlorophyll capsules, it was horrendous. But that IAG, oh my God, it's the easiest fiber in the world to take. And it tastes great. All right. There are questions so that's kind of carbohydrate, fiber, feeding the probiotics, the bacteria. You get into proteins in the microbiome, and it gets a little fuzzy, it gets a little gray. Proteins can be helpful for the bacteria in our GI tract, but then it comes to a point where we're not completely digesting proteins. Then we get into some problems. So I said, when certain undigested peptides and amino acids undergo bacterial metabolism, this word doesn't look really good, putrefaction. When that happens, short-chain fatty acids turn into these ugly monsters, is what I like to think of them as, and can lead to issues of IBS and colorectal cancer. Two things I don't really think anyone wants. Yeah, right? I know. This one right here, yeah. That's not good. So my issue with this whole thing is that, boy, let me think here now. What helps to digest proteins? Stomach acid. What's like the number? I don't know what it is. What's in the top 5 sold medications in the U.S.? Antacids, PPIs. I mean, every time I turn on the TV, it's another acid blocker. How many of those patients are on I actually have a lot of patients that come to me for reflux help. I had a patient a month ago. She's still on a PPI. Been on it for 20 years. What's her risk of developing, IBS or cholera? I don't know what it is, but I imagine it's more than that risk is higher in her than it is in me. I'm sure this is going on to some level. I'd rather it not be going on at all. So you start kind of, I'm sure, hopefully in the fine print of these PPIs somewhere, it says, oh yeah, increases your risk of colorectal cancer. Maybe they haven't studied that yet, but yeah. Fats in the microbiota. So proteins, again, grayish area. Same thing with fats. Western diet, again, I call it the typical SAD diet, standard American diet, typically low in fiber, high in animal-based saturated fats, is associated with increased levels of lipopolysaccharides. Who cares? What's lipopolysaccharides? Well, it's an endotoxin from gram-negative bacteria. Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good. And it's not. LPS increases gut permeability. I'm sure we've heard of the term leaky gut syndrome. So there's a problem going on right here with our typical diet and how it's, again, related right back to our bacteria in our gut. Trying to do the right thing, but we're not doing the right thing for our bacteria. So that is problematic. So not too much fat, saturated fat, in our diets ideally. And again, Mary talks all about that and gives you the whole setup of, again, you want to know what to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next 2 months. She's got it in her book. Gives you all the recipes. So trivia question number 2. What healthy fat may possibly limit the negative effects of saturated fats on the microbiota? So the answer is omega-3 fatty acids. So yeah, AKA fish oil, AKA, I don't know what is, extra virgin olive oil's got some omega-3s in there. I don't know how much, what percentage, but it's in there. But yeah, so even Dr. Mark Hyman talks about this. Mary talks about this. Dr. Robert Silverman, a lot of well-known doctors and so forth throughout the country. There's this connection between, okay, and there's always somebody in the audience like, well, give me the loophole. Can I still have my Culvers, which I do eat once a week probably, usually on Thursdays. Can I still have my Culvers and not increase my risk of heart disease or not increase my risk of, this going on? And the answer is maybe. So what do I personally do? And no one's beat me yet. Well, I'll throw this out there. If anyone can beat my omega-3 index level, I will pay for your omega-3 index level test, which is $75.
And what's the level?
My level, I didn't have it up here, is over 9. The goal is between 8 and 12%. My omega-3 index is 9.17, something like that.
Everybody's 11 to 1.
No way. Well, you got to prove it to me.
I'll give you my
Okay,
food diet-
that
diagnosis.
would be awesome. Yes, because then everyone I've tested,
What steakhouse are we going on?
Jake's. We'll go to Jake's. Yeah. But that's so. Yeah, we need omega-3s. I mean, we're not, they're not the villain, but we want to make sure we get enough omega-3s with our 6s. That's the take-home point on that. So, probiotics for the treatment of dysbiosis. So, I keep talking about probiotics. Again, these are just bacteria that are they're nomads. They just wander through your GI tract and then out they go. And so, yes, they can be used for treating GI issues. However, we got to make sure that the bacteria that's in this capsule this is orthobiotic. I just grabbed it, but whatever that bottle is of a probiotic, how do we know that it's going to turn back to life once it gets into our GI tract? We don't know that. How does the manufacturer prove this to me? It's whatever the word I'm trying to say, freeze-dried. That one actually is not freeze-dried. I won't get into that, but there's different ways than freeze-drying probiotics to make them more viable once they come back to life, so to speak, in your GI tract. That's why this one's shelf-stable too at room temperature instead of being refrigerated. So I don't want to get into all of that tonight, but we want to make sure that by definition, probiotics have to be alive and have a defined health benefit. Meaning, I get questions maybe once a month, I would say, maybe every couple of times a month. Do you sell soil-based probiotics? And the answer is I don't. One is I can't find them. Two is nothing's really been studied on soil-based probiotics in a vigorous way. They have studied soil-based probiotics, but it's usually funded by the company that's making them. So there's a incentive interest in there, exactly. So, but we don't know what's the advantage of a soil. We don't know what strain it is. So when it gets into probiotics and which brand to take and which one, it should be evidence-based. We should have some definitive health benefit proven to us as a consumer that yes, that probiotic is beneficial. That's because there's so much probiotic out there. Like, to me, it drives me a little bit crazy that why is that bacteria in there, and why are you charging me twice as much compared to the product next to it? And so we got to make sure that there's a defined benefit. So, and this is just my belief. obtaining patient health benefits should focus on microbial diversity. And that's kind of what Tom says too, more so than individual strains. There are some companies that have come and talked to me over and over again saying, we're the only company that has studies, and we're the only company that has identified the exact strain of Lactobacillus acidophilus or Bifidium bacterium, and because of that, you should buy it and sell it to your customers even though it's twice as expensive as everything else on your shelf. And I'm thinking, you haven't shown that your identified strain compared to your competitors is giving that patient a better clinical outcome, so why am I going to make them or convince them or try to have them pay twice as much money for that? I'm not going to do it. So it just comes down to, for me, that whole going back to diversity, because we don't know, well, I think we know very little still on probiotics and which ones to take and so forth. So we're getting better, but that's why I think diversity is leading towards that way. That's the part that's going to win out, not so much the actual strain. So the use of probiotics becomes part of the transient microbiome, meaning they're just hang out for a while, kick out the bad guys, let the natural microbiome that we're born with set up residence a little bit stronger, and then out they go. Yep. So again, if you had to pin me down for some probiotics, I like the orthobiotic. Why? One, it's multi-strain. It's diverse. It's got 6 different strains. Plus it has Saccharomyces boulardii, which is actually a nutritional yeast, which that's my go-to for people that get the C. diff, Clostridium difficile infection, which is horrendously hard to treat. I'll put patients on that basically forever. This is kind of the fire hose approach. So if somebody has horrendous symptoms, IBS, they're just miserable for whatever reason, been on multiple courses of antibiotics, so on and so forth. They've got chronic yeast infections, whatever's going on. I'm going to load them up on this, even though it's $70. They're going to take that for 2 weeks, and then they'll taper back down to like an orthobiotic, like a 50 billion CFU. But again, depending on the fire, is going to dictate which probiotic I'm going to recommend. And again, but this is all in addition to a healthy diet, the right amount of fiber, which is the right amount of fuel, so on and so forth. So I'm not just recommending this.